Welcome to Beyond the Tour. I'm Jake Hauer. With me today is someone I've been meaning to get on to have a chat with for a little while. Bill Donald, how are you?
Hi, Jake. I'm very good. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me onto your show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I come across you first in and around the Live Adelaide period of time. I come across you on X and you were sort of talking about your experience of traveling across the Live, and you have come out from Ireland and you're the GM of Cathedral Lodge Golf Club here in Australia.
Absolutely correct, Jake.
How long have you been out in Melbourne for?
Only 6 months. So previously I was at Loch Lomond, General Manager Loch Lomond Golf Club for 13 years. And before that, the K Club Director of Golf for 4.5 years. This is my 28th year in golf. God, I'm getting old. And just the allure of Cathedral and the fact that it's got such huge potential, that's what attracted me out to your beautiful country. Of course, just north of Melbourne.
What do you mean when you say it's got huge potential?
Well, I think when you look at golf clubs and maybe private clubs as well, what I look for is something called heart and soul. So something that's got a bit of a vibe, that's got something that you can sort of relate to. I think Cathedral's got that in absolute buckets and spades. A membership's a terrific membership. They're very social. They're quite a close-knit community group, but of course membership's restricted and limited. I just really like their approach to golf and their approach to life as well. That's what I look for. I want to enjoy myself. You know, it's a job that can bring a lot of challenges to it. And, you know, you can go into the lion's den somewhat. But I have to say what David and Sonia Evans have produced out here at Cathedral is remarkable.
Maybe touch on for our listener a little bit about the experience for members.
Yeah, I mean, offers this sort of private, exclusive club. So you must be invited by a member to have a game at Cathedral or to get the opportunity to play at Cathedral Lodge. So the members are sort of in control, which I think is a good thing. What we have here is some beautiful properties where people can stay. There are some privately owned homes as well. And there are a number of dormy rooms where, as I say, people can relax, put their feet up. But also we have this super clubhouse with the most amazing view of the ranges at Cathedral. Greg Norman was the course designer. And this view is spectacular. It's very difficult to describe, but it's just, I think, one of the best views in world golf.
The concept of Cathedral, really, it's relatively unique in Australia. That's not so in the rest of the world, is it? It seems to be becoming more and more common. In New Zealand, you've got places like Tara Iti and Cape Kidnappers. Over in the UK and Ireland, is it a lot more common over there, this style of club?
Not overly. I used to get this question a fair amount when I was at Loch Lomond because it was private. There are a few, so half a dozen or so, that are private that I can think of at the top of my head. And people would say, well, we can't get access. I mean, Loch Lomond's a national park. And then you've got this golf club and we can't get access and we feel as if we're slightly shortchanged about that. But, I would explain that in Ireland, there's 300 golf clubs, and in the rest of, if you like, the UK, if you want to put it like that, or the British Isles, there are hundreds and hundreds of golf clubs. So you've got lots and lots of choice. And it's not as if you don't have a choice to go and play public golf courses or other golf courses you can pay a green fee and get onto. So I think there's room for every kind of golf club of whatever ilk you want to be. And therefore, private does exist, not huge in number, but they do exist, mainly more so in America, I think. But for Australia, it does appear to be relatively unique. Not unique around the world, but certainly, as I say, small in number. But that's okay. I mean, plenty of choice, Jake.
What's got you into the golf industry?
Well, I've just released a series of podcasts of who'd be a golf manager. I was in England at the time in a different career entirely. A friend of mine phoned me up and said this particular golf club called Clandyboy Golf Club in Northern Ireland, I was looking for a general manager, and I had a background in hospitality. and done a little bit of managing, but I was quite young. I was in mid-20s. And my father had a connection with this golf club as well, and I knew quite a few of the members. Although I was just outside London, I decided to apply, and I got the job. And I was their first general manager, and I was very pleased to be. And I really enjoyed it, and moved on to Hilton Group,
Yep.
and then on to a place called Lougherne, Lougherne, and that's where we signed a very young Rory McIlroy, which fortunately still trying to recover from that US Open result. And we signed Rory at 15 and a half, just kind of before he turned pro. And the first two majors he won had Lougherne in the front of the bag. So I knew the family, I knew Jerry well, and Rory, young Rory as well. And of course, he's gone on to do great things. Though I think us Rory fans are suffering slightly, but he'll bounce back. He'll definitely bounce back.
Yeah, I think he will. It was a little bit of a tough watch.
Oh my God.
So tell me then, what does it sort of involve? Like, I'd imagine there's lots of different aspects. Maybe give our listener a little bit of a broad overview of what running a golf club involves.
Well, I think first and foremost, you have a responsibility to either the proprietor or members, or both, where you have to provide some guidance, and you have to gather evidence through member surveys, or staff surveys, or financial results as well. And you have to try, I think you have a responsibility to be able to take the membership stroke owners through a journey of how the club is performing. You have to be accountable for that. But of course, you've got the usual day-to-day management, which is of staff. I've got the catering, beverage, you've got the golf shop, meet and greet, concierge service, events team, and an administration setup. So it is like a mini business.
Yes.
And you're in the hospitality industry. So if anybody's in the golf industry, well, that's kind of technically true, but actually we're in the hospitality industry. So if you think about, we all avail of different aspects of hospitality. Well, it's no different in a golf club. You have all those different hospitality, and you have to pull them together, and you have to present the club in the best way that you can. So you have all those challenges of dealing with people and members as well, and proprietors and expectations, but you have a job to take everybody through a particular journey.
Yep. So you're talking about getting Rory McIlroy and sort of signing him. Presumably the organization or the golfing program there was a lot larger, with much larger budgets than maybe what you're dealing with at a place like Cathedral. How would the two be different, do you think? How is running Cathedral different to running a bigger operation to what you've done in the past?
Well, I think there's things that you have by running a business. So payroll percentage, so therefore same applies if you're running a Hilton or a Loch Lomond or a Cathedral. So it's your payroll percentage is always going to be important that you have it within, your budget. I would say that Cathedral with a smaller amount of staff, it is much more homely, home from home, and also you do have a family type feel to it. So when you get a family type feel, people can be very invested, and also you get a sort of, if you get it wrong, a family can fall apart, as we know. But if you get it right, you have those different sort of emotions of a smaller club and a smaller team. And every action you take can have a consequence that is felt throughout the club. So while it could be in food and beverage, they'll still feel it in the pro shop and in administration and in events because it's a small team. Larger teams such as Hilton and Loch Lomond as well, K Club. I was at the K Club, and they had large 50-odd members of staff at Loch Lomond, for example. These are large clubs, and you always take a helicopter view, Jake, but you took sort of a helicopter view of the larger clubs. So therefore you had people in position to carry out what their responsibilities were. And then they sort of filtered what information they wanted to me on hopefully a regular basis. Here, you're literally getting the information up close and personal, because you're in the kitchen or you're in the bar or you're whatever, and you're more accessible, I think, as well. And I think that there's a certain exhilaration to that of managing a smaller club. It's definitely personal.
Yes. Is there a focus? I wouldn't imagine focus on marketing per se, but in terms of sales, is it a lot of sales with that sort of pipeline for a cathedral versus a K club? How does that aspect differ?
It's a really good question, Jake. And sales and marketing goes through every organization.
Yeah.
And irrelevant what it is, it's just that your product price mix is one. So you've got a quality product. How do you price it? So that's a challenge that every organization has. Also, communication to the members is vital. And I found that out over my years involved in golf and business, that you have to ensure that members are well informed. So that also falls into obviously communication and marketing. And also your materials and your products that you sell in the pro shop or whatever have to be of a particular standard that suits the club that you're managing. So actually see and how first impressions, how you answer the telephone. Yeah, it's actually similar rules apply throughout. So I have a background in sales and marketing, and I'm well aware of the importance of that sort of sales and marketing mix that you must have in every organization.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would be not necessarily targeted, but you're thinking of members, guests, and the impression you're giving them. And of course, the club is representing the member, really, aren't they, when they've got guests involved?
Well, that's right. And the key to it is make sure the guest feels like a member. And that's the key. And if they feel that we don't distinguish, then you get a very positive result.
How do you find that the Australian golf market is different to the UK and Ireland?
Well, I can see obviously the golf industry per se, Jake, we have this camaraderie and there are things that are very, very similar. Of course, the sport's similar. And there are things that you kind of think, well, I could be in Ireland or Scotland or America, but I'm in Australia and sort of similar rules apply. What I've seen maybe culturally, it's sharpening me up a bit as well, is that from what I've seen, you Aussies, you attack the golf game. My God, you go out from the very first blow and you are really hurtling for very competitive, sharp. And I think that maybe I've seen it more sociable and it's very sociable over here as well. But there is a good competitiveness to it. You guys are very, very competitive. And I like that. I like that. So that's one thing that I've noticed in particular. I think that the Sandbelt's some of the best golf in the world. Australia's produced some of the best golfers in the world. The one thing that, and maybe this is not quite answering your question directly, that I find absolutely astonishing is that the Australian Open has fallen away, it appears, to when I remember it, particularly in the 80s and 90s, and I'm friendly with Ronan Rafferty, and I think Ronan won the Australian Open, or certainly he's won in Australia a couple of times, and I find it just sad that seems to be the case, which is why I guess Liv have come in and it's been a massive success in Adelaide, because the country's starved of top golf, and it shouldn't be. Australia should be one of the top names, and hopefully when a world tour, which it will happen, Australia is definitely involved in that, and I'm sure they will be.
Yeah. I think from my perspective there, I think one of the biggest issues is you always get a diehard who will go and watch anything. Like I've been involved in golf since 2015 and I will attend wherever possible, any sort of top level amateur events, top level. The general fan as a rule is probably attracted to seeing the very best play. And one thing we've sort of lacked here in the last sort of 15, 20 years is the opportunity to see the very best play. So I think that's where Liv is maybe able to capitalize on it a little bit. It's disappointing to see what's happening with the Australian Open, but you guys are putting on a really great event that you've run for a couple of years, the Cathedral Invitational.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit around the backstory of that. What was the goal in starting that and putting on that particular event?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been an incredible success, and all credit to the team here who's put it on for 2 years in a row. It's no mean feat. If you think about it, that it's not sanctioned, so therefore it was the team at Cathedral that actually had to put it on. That was an awful lot of work, but it was the brainchild of David Evans, the proprietor, and he wanted a top level tournament at Cathedral. I guess the spin-offs are you're allowed to come and watch as a spectator. So it was opening up the club. He wanted to have top level competition, which he achieved. Adam Scott won the Cathedral Invitational last year. Cam Smith played in it. Leash plays in it. And a plethora of other people. And that's an incredible achievement from a sort of a private club, which is, is Cathedral accessible? Well, by chopper, it's a bit of a drive from Melbourne. I attended the second event, and I wasn't employed here at the time, and I was absolutely blown away by the organisation, the field. The spectators were terrific as well. David wanted a bit of a community, open up to the community. He's very aware of being a good community person as well, which I think he's achieved. Also, for his own benefit, he's a huge sports fan. Bringing something of that ilk to Cathedral was such joy to him. And you're in this game to enjoy yourself as well. And I think he ticked a lot of boxes, exceeded expectations for sure, and was a world-class field.
Is that something that you plan to continue where logistically possible putting on in the future?
Yeah, and if it is possible, say we do it, there's good connections, particularly with Adam Scott and others as well, and they really love Cathedral Lodge. So I think there's every opportunity for it to happen again, Jake, whether it becomes a bit like JP McManus at Adair Manor, every 7 years or every 3 years or 2 years or whatever, that might settle into that sort of vibe. But I think that it's been such a success that let's hope there's another one coming up in a year's time or so.
Where do you see success of Cathedral? I think it's seen, what else in Australia is there? Maybe, I guess, Alliston to a certain extent, maybe down here, Capital, potentially, I guess. There wouldn't be too many other courses like that in Australia, really, outside of the Royals.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, Greg Norman was here not that long ago, and, it was great to get an opportunity to have a chat with him. I'd never met him before. And, he was waxing lyrical about Cathedral and the golf course, and why wouldn't you? It is amazing. It's incredible. And, I did distinctly get the feeling that it was pretty unique. I think the setting, just to my right, actually, as we're speaking at the moment, the sun's shining, is beautiful. But the setting, Jake, is just unbelievable. I mean, Loch Lomond's setting is hard to beat as well. Just set in the two valleys gives a different sort of feel to it. I know Celtic Manor they're in the valleys. It's massive. Celtic Manor in Wales that held the Ryder Cup. It's massive, and I wouldn't compare. It's impossible to compare, I think, as well. But it is set in the valley, but to be set in two valleys is something else. It's really unique, and I don't know if that's totally unique in world golf. So I guess what David and Greg Norman have achieved looks and feels to me very, very unique.
Yeah, it certainly does. You guys, I think, again, on looking at social, have do you have an alliance? Well, not an alliance, but there's a few events on with other clubs. I think Tara Iti is one each year, isn't it?
Yeah, that seems to be a very close association. I look forward to going over at some stage of Tara Iti, and I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, there's a close association between both clubs, and I think there's a like-mindedness as well. And of course, that's what you're looking for, isn't it? And plenty of clubs with plenty of hookups, but I'm, at times not sure that they both share the same values. I think that I can honestly say in this case that both clubs do appear to share the same values and goals and objectives, and that's a tremendous link.
How do you go, because Thornton, as you said, it's a little bit out of Melbourne. How do you go in terms of staffing?
Well, it's a good question. And again, if I go back to Loch Lomond, we set an objective to be a preferred employer. There are people around the area, and Alexandra has a population of about 4,000. And our aim is to be a preferred employer. So therefore, we are going to launch, which is very exciting, a graduate scheme. We're going to offer 2 places for 2 graduates to be trained in golf management and hospitality. So by the time they finish the 2-year program here, they'll be well set. And I think we need to be seen as an educator, and we need to be seen as a facilitator for people to springboard onto their career. And we need to play a significant role in that. And we talk a lot about staff engagement, and we talk a lot about benefits for staff, and how can we be seen in as positive a light as possible. And it is a real thing. And yes, we are rural, but I know if we hit those particular marks, we will have people very keen to come and join the Cathedral revolution. And I think that anybody listening, Jake, that's involved in running a club or is going to go into golf management or whatever, your staff are everything. They are absolutely everything. You cannot do or achieve anything without good staff, and they should be the top priority. So we actually take it exceptionally seriously, and I'm very excited for next year, or for next season, I should say. It looks as if we've got a real top quality lineup of staff. But this particular graduate scheme will be launched within the next month or so. And I think that that's going to be a real game changer as well for us. I mean, we're very, very excited about it.
Yep. So you talk about seasons. Now we're in the middle of winter at the moment. We're in winter. I would imagine you've got two things, two aspects that you've got. Number one, you've got the seasons. But number two, being outside of Melbourne, it's probably not a primary sort of course that many of your members would play at. How do you find that? Are you sort of busy over the period of a particular weeks, or do you have sort of surges? How does that differ to somewhere else you've been involved with?
Yeah. So Loch Lomond was closed in January, and then the golf course reopened again in April. So here we're closed in July, and we open second week in August. But I have to say, and the day's no different, it's glorious sunshine, and there are people about. And actually last weekend we were sold out, which was, I think, the first time they've achieved that in June. So all the rooms were taken and the restaurant was packed. So there is a market for it. At Loch Lomond, we dropped the prices for accommodation. We've done the same for the last 2 weeks here. It's very, very weather dependent, but the weather looks good. And they tell me this time last year it was a complete wipeout. So we're definitely seem to be benefiting from an Indian summer. And the activity's good, Jake. And to be fair, we are absolutely delighted because when I arrived, it was a bit like, well, June we'll be looking at each other, and it's not going to be particularly vibrant. My God, the weekends are great, and as I say, the last weekend it was sold out signs of members and guests. Great atmosphere. So it's really, really important to try and make sure the season extends as long as possible. And we have spent some significant amount of money on drainage. Loch Lomond was the same. And here is the same. So that drainage is pretty deep, and it's making a big difference. Not that it had been used that much actually recently, but when it comes to it, it'll pay back for sure. The investment, it's a good investment, and it's making the course playable for longer. And I think that's key.
Yeah. Is tourism something that the club is interested in terms of golf tourism, inbound golf tourism at all, or is it?
Yeah, no, you've got to be invited by a member. So I guess that, that's not going to preclude or exclude anybody in that industry, but it'll be under the auspices of being invited by a member. You can't profiteer. So that's seen, it's not allowed to ride off the back of a private club or any club like that. I guess that it can happen, but I'm not sure we'll see too much in the way of tourism for Cathedral.
Yeah, I think so. I guess the one that I look at is something like a Tariti, which essentially is a private club as well, but they have the ability to go and play, to stay and play, if you're willing to pay the price to do so. And it's essentially a one-off as well, I believe. So it's a one-time sort of experiential program.
Castle in North Scotland, I think they have a tea time a day. Renaissance, which hosts the Scottish Open, they're something similar, and they have to have some access to, the public has to have some access to that golf course, or else the Scottish government, who used to certainly part fund the Scottish Open, wouldn't then be a partner. So there are anomalies to this. Now, Cathedral hasn't gone down that line. May it go down that line? Well, for me, it's nice to keep it private on a selfish basis, and for members to stay in that sort of control. But I think if it did go to unaccompanied, which is slightly different,
Yeah.
And a lot of American clubs do this. So you're a member, so you can book a tea time. There's a few available per week, and you book a tea time for 4 of your friends to come, but it's you that books at the member. Maybe there's something there, but at this moment in time, you can't do that either. So it really is truly exclusive.
We're benefiting at the moment from essentially a COVID influx of golfers in the industry. So golf around the world is incredibly popular. How have you found previously that you've been able to attract and maintain memberships in clubs?
While at the K Club, the economic fallout of the subprime mortgage market late 2007, 2008 was an absolute killer. Ireland in particular really suffered. And just economically, people couldn't afford, or something had to give. So you got a cost of living crisis. Something has to give, and normally it's your, home entertainment you retain, you hold on to, but sometimes it's the memberships of clubs that I'm afraid are expendable. And there have been peaks and troughs, and I can remember attending a conference in Dublin. And it was Dermot Desmond, who owns Celtic Football Club, who was speaking. And Dermot gives very, very few lectures, but he's a hugely fascinating individual. And he said it is as simple as this, that supply exceeds demand, and some golf clubs are just going to have to go. And he was right, really, as terrible as it seems. He definitely was right. And then sort of golf ebbed and flowed. I thought mid-market golf clubs got squeezed. So you had your public golf courses, which might have been $20 to play a round of golf. And then you had your exclusive golf clubs that seemed to be okay. And then you had your royal clubs, as you guys have as well. And you couldn't get into them. That they had a sort of a large waiting list. So they always seemed to be, and it was the middle clubs that were getting squeezed, and that certainly was the case up until COVID. And then all of a sudden there was a boom time again in golf. And then it was really up to the club to be able to retain those additional members. And I think quite a few of them have. And while you can see a drift back to the transient golfer, so the guy or girl that wants to just rock up and play a golf course and go for the cheaper option or whatever. They have a whole stack of choices, so they don't need to be a member, but you don't get your handicap either. So that's something you have to bear in mind. COVID was definitely a boom. I'm not sure that I've seen too much outside of the fact that it was COVID to say that golf was being promoted in a very positive way that has brought participation in at such huge numbers. It definitely, I think, was down to COVID and people falling back in love with golf that maybe walked away from. Now, retention, as I mentioned, is absolutely key. But for the likes of Loch Lomond, the quality that they had there is a waiting list, and the product's a good one. Cathedral, there seems to be demand for the product here, and it's also an excellent product. So there is that market, top tier, that are interested in that sort of quality. And it's just back to the cost of living, Jake. And with oil and energy prices, the squeeze is maybe back on. And there could be a drift away again from golf clubs. The point that I made with the first golf club I managed, I was absolutely convinced, and it's going to sound obvious, but if you got members using your golf club for food and beverage, or you spending secondary spend, then when it came to renewing their membership, they're much more likely to do it. Whereas they rock up on a Saturday, get out of the car, change their shoes, play a game of golf, get back into the car and go home. Yes, I see that they've enjoyed a game of golf, but it really hasn't added much value to their life. A game of golf has, and the competition has, and their camaraderie with their mates, and that might be good enough. But I wouldn't like to risk it without, if they felt that they couldn't go into the clubhouse, or they couldn't go into the bar, or they couldn't bring their partner or their kids to the club. And these are things I think are massively important. And for clubs at a particular level to retain their newly found members, I think the culture, possibly for some of them, needs to change as well into smart casual, into theme nights, and sort of break down a lot of barriers. And if clubs who had foresight to do that, probably I would say have much greater opportunity to make it a success. But those that maybe have stuck to tradition and maybe not moved with the times and are in that middle category could struggle, Jake, over time.
I think the point on hospitality is a big one to be made because COVID has just decimated the hospitality industry.
Mhm.
And the level of service that you generally get now is a lot lower. A lot of the best talent in the hospitality industry left the industry over COVID for various reasons, one of them being lifestyle choice. I
Yeah.
think golf clubs have the ability to really capitalize on that because you're not necessarily getting designated hospitality stuff. You're getting people who are working in hospitality through the golf club, but maybe are attracted to that work environment for other reasons. So I think you've got the ability to capture people who are very enthusiastic. And if you can teach them the hospitality skills and encourage them to deliver that level of hospitality, I think golf clubs have a real opportunity to capitalize because people are probably not enjoying their dining out experience as much as they would have pre-COVID at the moment.
Well, it's an interesting point you make because if you join a club, it means you enjoy the club. So you
Yes.
start off with that. So you think, okay, so my market, right, let's mine the membership to start off with because they've already bought into the fact that they're a member of the club. So let's then sort of overlay that with hospitality, hopefully excellence, which is what every member, of course, wants. So you've got a willing marketplace to start off with, and usually an encouraging marketplace as well. So you're right, you can blood, you got members, kids as well, looking for jobs, and maybe that's a good place to start. If you're struggling to attract staff, that could be a good area to start. Is get amongst the membership and say, does your son or daughter, want a job, and we'll train them and what have you. Also, the environment. Some people think it could be a bit stuffy and difficult, but it can be very respectful. And maybe the hospitality industry in the world that we live in these days was. And in a club, if you're running it properly and anybody oversteps the line, well, that gets dealt with by the board or general manager. You could lose your membership. So there is a consequence to acting badly. Whereas if it's in a restaurant or whatever, you may never see that person again, or, it becomes difficult if they come back again. What do you do? Do you ban them? How do you do it? So in many ways, I can see how golf and hospitality has an opportunity. I think part of the issue and part of the problem is, will members spend the money that's required to keep a hospitality level at the expectations, exceed members' expectations? That's always a difficult balancing act. I think that one that members of a club need to think about very carefully, because costs have gone up. Inevitably, that means that the cost of food has gone up, and therefore that's going to be reflected in the price. So what constitutes good quality value for money is obviously the key question. I think that can stymie a club as well, that sort of spiral of I don't want to pay over the odds, or I don't want to pay a particular price for a particular dish, and it gets all a bit price sensitive. But I think that what you started off by saying, that it could be a good environment to train people and to bring people into the hospitality industry, I think is true. I think if you're comfortable in that environment, not everybody is, but I think if you're comfortable and you're used to that sort of environment, then I think you're right. Golf clubs is a great way to get into the hospitality industry. And I think under conditions that are probably favorable for the staff member.
Now, you sort of halfway through that episode, you mentioned that you've started your own podcast. What brought you to start that particular podcast?
Well, it was something that I just wanted to develop. So I thought, well, if I get into podcasting, I'm going to start to do a bit of research. It's going to be good for my development. It's something that I would be quite keen to put myself out there. But as a team at Loch Lomond, we said, look, how can we improve our communication to the membership? What can we do that's a bit different? And then we came up with a view from the Loch. And I just got a whole plethora of guests willing to come on the show. Some were members. The membership's all over the world. So we have some fantastic sports people, business people, and then they had good connections as well. Lee Westwood came on. He's a member. Bob McIntyre's a member as well, but I couldn't get Bob on. But Lee came on and was fascinating for an hour or so. And not just Mark Calcavecchia, I can remember as well. I did a podcast with him. And just people throughout the world of entertainment, sport and business. And they lined up to come onto this podcast that Loch Lomond members were able to download. Actually, a golf radio program in Washington picked up on it, and they published them as well, which was fine. I guess it came through us trying to be innovative and creative, and nobody else wanted to do the podcast, Jake. So I was left holding the baby, and I was happy to do it. And it was just really great fun. And there's some cricketers. Jeffrey Boycott certainly came on, and again was fascinating. Paul Collingwood was another who's a member of Loch Lomond as well. And it was just, it seemed to be very, very straightforward and easy to get people to come on and talk golf. So, yeah. So that led me, and then I was asked to do this podcast, who'd be a golf manager, and it's out on Spotify and what have you, and it's really, really taken off. I mean, it's something crazy, like 135 cities and 17 countries. I've sort of logged on to it, and it's become a bit of a thing. But as I say, I'm finishing with Loch Lomond, and that's coming out this week, and then that will be me. I have been approached about a half an hour show a week that in line with a betting company that I'm thinking about, but I don't know. I mean, this could do me. Who'd want to be a golf manager could be the end of me in podcasting. I've got a full-time job at Cathedral and need to make sure I concentrate on that as well, Jake.
Yeah. As you said, it's a great medium to engage with your audience just because they listen. They're in your ear for half an hour, 45 minutes. So it's certainly a form of media and communication that you just can't really get in other sort of platform, really. But it's a great way to meet people as well. And you have some great chats with others.
I remember with my father and the characters, and there wasn't social media then, and the stories were, okay, it's Ireland and there's stories everywhere in Ireland for sure. Yeah, I don't know if I hear as many stories as I used to. Funny stories in golf and people telling you and regaling what happened to them or who they met or whatever. And the one thing over the career is, I've met an awful lot of people involved with golf. And some of the stories just are either very funny or very interesting as well. And actually, with the Loch Lomond story, Tom Weiskopf is the course developer, was a course developer. Tom nearly died on the course at Loch Lomond. Now, you'll have to tune in when I release it. It is a hell of a story. And I mean, he literally thought he was gone. And, as well as, a funny story with Tom where somebody took his clubs, thought they were hire clubs. I mean, Tom Weiskopf, second in the Masters 4 times, won the Open in Troon, major player in the world of golf, probably one of the best swings in golf. And this guy doesn't pick up the hire clubs, picks up Tom Weiskopf's golf clubs. We discover that this chap's on the 7th. Tom Weiskopf approaches him in a buggy. It's got Weiskopf in the side of the bag. And he said, "Hey, buddy, do you realize that they're my golf clubs?" And the guy said, "Are these seriously your golf clubs?" And Weiskopf said, "Yeah, they are." And he said, "Well, you can take them because they're effing terrible. I've only scored 2 points in the first 7 holes, and they're the worst golf clubs I've ever seen my entire life. And give me that other set. I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Weiskopf. What an embarrassment." And in fact, he got sworn at and practically the clubs thrown at him. I mean, it was just, he really thought that was so funny. So, to be able to tell those sort of stories is just, I think, if anything, we're slightly lacking them in golf. There's plenty of analysis. There's plenty of talk between Liv and the PGA and people choosing one side or the other. Or there's plenty of chat about what's happened at the US Open today or other majors or other tournaments. And I get it in the analysis and people pitching their 2 pennies worth in. But come on, where's the stories? Where's the funny stories? Where's the things that have happened? Or you've met a professional golfer and they've said something funny or they've done something that's worth reporting. I don't know. I think there's a gap for that, Jake, for sure. And I think that the podcasts have done my best tell as many stories as possible. And actually, I even get into telling a story about Led Zeppelin. It was a story that I didn't believe, and it turned out to be true when they released a book 3 years ago. I actually saw an excerpt, and this particular factual information that had been passed on to me was actually true, and I couldn't believe it. So, it's just good, I think, to get into that sort of storytelling mode.
Yep. Well, Bill, it's been great chatting. I've really enjoyed it, and I've been enjoying that podcast as well. The stories are great. We don't hear enough of these stories, so I'm really happy that you're sharing it. For our listener, where can they keep in touch with you? Would X be the place to be?
Yeah. I mean, it's at Bill Bill Donald Donald 1, and you'll see sort of pinned on my Twitter account the podcast I've alluded to, or it's on Spotify. It's under Golf Management, and actually the unwielding title, the movie that Quentin Tarantino could have made, because it is a lot of ups and downs. And that's on Spotify. It's on Amazon Music as well, I believe. And I guess that's the channels you can find it on. So it's relatively underground, but it's really taken off. And people who've contacted me say, just tell us the stories, Bill. Tell us the stories. So Loch Lomond's coming up, and there's a lot of stories connected with Loch Lomond that I think people will enjoy hearing.
Oh, wonderful. Bill, been great chatting. Listener, thank you for tuning in, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Jake, you're an absolute gentleman, and good luck with everything. I think it's excellent what you're doing, and please, people, give Jake a bit of a shout out as well. I think a very important contribution in the world of golf. So thanks for having me on, Jake.
Thanks a lot.